My name is Victoria Dorper, and in addition to being a member of the City Club Program Committee, I'm the director of the Northwest Regional Council, which is an area agency on aging. And I have worked for that organization for about 35 years now. So I've spent a lot of time working with older adults, and now I am one. And one of the things that I have learned in that time period is that older adults aren't on some planet outside of the gravitational pull of families and neighborhoods and friends. They are part and parcel of our communities and our everyday lives. So when older adults struggle to make ends meet, it affects their kids and it affects their grandkids, just as when children struggle to go to a good school and to have enough food on the table, it affects their parents and grandparents. So I wanted to kind of set that stage. We sometimes forget about that interconnectedness, especially when we all kind of see and hear discussions about the budget that somehow seems to always end up pitting schools against older food programs, and really it's all connected. What we want to do today is take a look at economics of aging and whether you can actually afford to grow old in Whatcom County. Some of you here, all of us, are aging in Whatcom County. Some of us are growing old in Whatcom County. And so we have some personal experience of that. What's interesting is that there is some new information, some new data around economics of aging, and it's county by county. It's called the Elder Economic Security Index. And we thought this would be a good topic to share. Sometimes it's hard to get out of our own personal lives to really have an understanding of what's going on around us and what people in our communities are experiencing. And certainly all of us hope to have enough money to last as long as we do. And we hope to have money to leave to our kids often. We certainly don't want to be a burden to our children. I know I hear people say that all the time. And so we want to look today a little bit at what does it really take to have maybe not a high quality of life, but what does it take to get your basic needs met? And so we do have a couple of speakers who have a lot of experience and who are going to share with us the data and some additional information. First, we have Shelley Zylstra. Raise your hand, Shelley. Shelley works for the Northwest Regional Council. She has a PhD. She's the director of our planning unit, and she has over 25 years of experience working in the field with older adults and people with disabilities. And our other speaker is Kathy Knight, who also has her PhD. She is the state director of the Association of Area Agencies on Aging in Washington State. And Kathy was the project coordinator for the Washington State Elder Economic Security Initiative, and so she can talk a little bit about how that initiative has been put together and participation of Washington State in that really kind of a bit of a cutting edge effort. So without further ado, I will hand this over. Kathy and Shelley will both kind of be near the projector over there. Oh, I wanted to say, I hope everybody has an actual copy of this PowerPoint. We know that folks like on that side of the room have a really hard time seeing the screen. So we tried to make enough copies of this, so if you have a hard time seeing the screen, you actually, does this look familiar to anybody on that side of the room? Okay, good, thank you. All right, so I will hand it over to Kathy and Shelley, and then once they're done, if there's time, I'll pose a couple of questions, and then, of course, we'll open it to everyone. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Thank you. I'm Kathy Knight. Can you hear me, everybody? Let me know. Just raise your hand if I start talking too softly. And excuse me. I got to keep my water handy. I learned a lesson watching TV about that. So, I've been working with the State Association and with directors like Victoria for about 6 years now. And it's been a real pleasure. They're a great group to work with. And when I saw this title, Can You Afford to Grow Old in Whatcom County? I had to come up here and find out. Because if anybody knows the answer, I know it's Shelley and I know it's Victoria, and I hope you all know that the Northwest Regional Council and all the folks there, they have all the answers you need to know. So you be sure and contact them if you haven't already. So how many here are retired? Hey. How many here hope to retire? Okay. Did you hear that might be less and less likely? So, yes, what I do want to come and talk to you about today with Shelley's help is a project that we've been working on. We had a wonderful opportunity to participate in a national effort with an organization called Wider Opportunities for Women. And it's really an effort to look at what it really does cost for an individual to retire. So to make it real for you, I want to do a little exercise. It'll just take a few minutes. I want your help with this. And you can write on your piece of paper. If you have a scratch pad. If you don't have a pencil, you can probably do this in your head, because I know you all really learned how to do math. And so you can actually do this in your head. Okay. So stop and just think for a minute. Your housing costs. You may be a renter. You may own your home. You may be paying a mortgage. Why don't you just jot down what you think it costs for you on a monthly basis for your housing costs? And so that includes, in that you want to include like your taxes, your insurance, your heat, your utilities. Don't try to give it too much thought, but I bet you have in mind, and if you're dealing with the budget, you have a general idea what it costs you each month for your overall housing costs. So write that down. This is just for you. And then I want you to write down what you think it costs you for food. And let's say you don't get to do any of this. We're not going out to eat. We're shopping at the store, coming home and fixing meals every day. We're keeping it simple. So jot down a number that you think is probably a pretty good reflection of what it costs you each month in terms of providing yourself food. Now, those of you who are retired, who are 65 and older, who are on Medicare, you can probably answer this question pretty easily. What's your monthly health care costs? So that's going to include your premium, maybe you have additional costs with some of your prescriptions, whatever. Just a general idea of what you think it costs you to cover your health care needs. Okay? You doing it in your head? Okay, keep track. Now you've added up 3 numbers. All right. The fourth one is your transportation. Whether you own a car or you use the bus, use public transportation, your gas, your maintenance, your insurance, what do you think on a monthly basis your transportation costs are for you up here in Whatcom County? Okay. Last number. We have a kind of miscellaneous category. These are things like clothing, shoes, cleaning products, household items, personal hygiene, telephone. Lump that all together, and what do you think on a monthly basis you probably have to spend on those kinds of miscellaneous items? Okay. I don't see too many people writing, so that means you must have it in your head. Because there will be a quiz at the end. We're going to find out how your numbers match up with what Shelley has to tell you about what it costs to grow old in Whatcom County. I'm going to go to the next slide. So what we're going to do today is just give you a general overview of what, this is such a big name, the Elder Economic Security Initiative. Big, big title. But it is part of a national initiative, and we were lucky to be the 13th of 17 states that actually were participants in phase 1 of this project. You're going to find out what the Elder Economic Security Index is, and from now on we're just going to call it the Elder Index, because that's a lot easier to say. We're going to talk about what this means for Washington State retirees, but mostly for you in Whatcom County, and what can we do to support the needs of older people in our community once we know what it costs. So, this project is a multi-year project, was done in conjunction with Wider Opportunities for Women in Washington, D.C., and with the University of Massachusetts Boston Gerontology Institute. They're the folks that did all the work to figure out this number, did the calculations to give us a better estimate of what it really costs when you're retired to live in every county in this country. So their purpose was they really wanted a better conceptual framework, better tools for assessing the economic well-being. And this is important. They wanted to shift from a perspective of, just what poverty level and what it means to live above and below the poverty level, to really start thinking about what does it mean, what do you need to have economic well-being in your life. So they developed this standard index as a part of it, and they have continued in all of their activities to keep this dialogue going at a national level. And if we have time later and you have any interest, we can tell you about some of what's going on at the national level to address the issue. This just shows you the original states that were involved. Where we fit on the map of states, and as I said, we were 13th of 17. The project was funded by Atlantic Philanthropies, and that phase ended, but what's great is even though all of these other states didn't get to do the kind of work we did, they've developed a national database. Anybody can get to that database. All you have to do is set up a login and a password for yourself. You can find out what they estimate it costs for a person to live in any county in this country. So that's interesting to know. Okay, what is the index? You probably have some idea of what it is because of the little exercise I just put you through. And it actually considers the expenses and the 5 categories that I used to, and by geographic area. So it really is specific to your community, and the indicators that they use are based on public data that come from the local level. And it looks at, so the Elder Index is really a measure of the cost to live a reasonable quality of life without having to choose between necessary expenditures. How many times do we hear about folks who are on a really limited income, and the choice is, do I buy groceries this month or do I get my medications? Do I fall behind on my rent? I mean, this is an effort to really look at people being able to get by and not having to worry about that. Okay, so we look at, in terms of the measures, we're looking at folks who are living in the community. This Elder Index does not address folks who have long-term support needs and may be in a nursing home or an assisted living facility. They're living independently, not with other family members of other generations. It is based on folks who are 65 or older because they do factor in what they know the costs of Medicare are, and that what a wonderful thing that you have that Medicare benefit. And it includes the Medicare because it's nearly universal. It does apply to elders that they assume are no longer working, but maybe to get to the level that you need for that Elder Index, you might be surprised how many people are. So the whole idea of the Elder Index is it's a new measure to illustrate the amount of income that's required to meet basic needs. And that's without public, private, or informal assistance. So when they calculate that number, they're saying this is what it costs based on any resources you have, your Social Security check, assets you may have. This is what we think it's costing you to live in this particular county. And it replaces older indices that have long been accepted. Shelley's going to talk a little bit more about the federal poverty level and that measure and why we want to get away from that. And it helps us answer the question about, will this allow us to age in place? Because we know, really, that's what we all want to be able to do. So I've kind of laid a little bit of the groundwork. I'm going to let Shelley get into the really good meat of the topic, and I'll turn it over to her.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. This chair out of the way, and I'm going to stand here and work the slides as well. I think before you can talk about the elder care security index, you have to think about what is an insecurity index. And one of the things that we have some gold standards in the United States. The current formula says that if a person is 100% of the poverty level, that they would be at risk, or that would be sort of the bottom line there. That threshold is $10,890. So for those of you who were able to add these numbers up in your head, were any of you above that? Okay. There is a relative measure that some programs use, and it's 60% of median income, and that number in our area is $12,280 a year. There is actually a lot of programs that allow entrance for 200% of the federal poverty level, which is roughly $21,000 a year. The beauty of the Elder Economic Security Index, or the Elder Index, is the fact that it is based on the location. And we know that people that are living in San Francisco have different costs than people who are living in Nevada, than people who are living in North Dakota. And so that's the reason why it's really critical not to apply this universal standard or these universal standards to people across the United States. And that's why this push to actually look at these as entrance points, and we'll look at what they are. This is one of my favorite things. In the census, the poverty level for older adults is actually lower, and I have them listed here for older adults, and the rationale behind that is that they eat less. They need fewer calories, okay? And so in order to be poor, all right, and be a young person, you only have $11,945, but for an older adult, you get less, about $1,000 less than that a year. You get $11,000 because, of course, it costs much less for you to go to the grocery store than somebody who's under 65. For a two-person household, you notice that that number doesn't double, okay? It just goes up somewhat. And so those types of, the numbers, I always got kind of a kick out of this. These are not used for entrance into any program. No one says old people have to make this much, young people. However, this is the census definition. And so many of the funds that are federal funds in this country are spread out amongst programs based on census data. The funding formulas for a variety of them are there. And so older adults really don't get counted as they should. Care Index is actually an excellent opportunity, primarily because it is geographically considered. It does look at housing costs, it looks at food costs, cost of transportation, health care, and then what they call miscellaneous costs, just like Kathy walked you through this morning. And it is calculated based on census data and other information that's gathered. How many of you have ever filled out the long form for census? Probably not a lot of you. They don't do very many, but you know that that's very, very thorough. Lots and lots of questions are asked there, and that's what this is drawn from. Information that you need to understand before we talk about this is that the housing data is actually those data reported by HUD on behalf of renters. They keep real close tabs on rental data because they want to know what is an average rent. Owners' data is averages of insurance and includes taxes, utilities, condo fees, mortgage, all those kinds of things. Food cost data is from the United States Department of Agriculture. They have a market basket survey that they use, and this is from their low economy program or their low-cost food plan. A single person is here. A married couple is about 20% above that, and that is one of the reasons why those poverty levels don't double when you go from one-person to two-person household. Transportation costs in the index assume that you're driving a car. So that would mean fuel, oil, tires, insurance, those kinds of things. When we start talking about health care data. We're talking about Medicare premiums. We're talking about Parts B and D, or Part C. If you don't know what those are, that's your homework. For those of you who are raised your hand about the I want to retire, that's a piece of information that you probably want to figure out before you actually sign on the dotted line. The thing that's important about to understand about Medicare, however, is that there isn't a family plan. If you have two older adults in the house, they both pay the premium. And so that there is no economy of scale there. Miscellaneous, because we all have a variety of miscellaneous things. My miscellaneous is not your miscellaneous. We want to make sure that people understand that the way this was calculated for the Elder Care Index was that it was a figure of 20% of the cost for people with no mortgage. So that was how it was figured, and that was applied across the board. So that's just a little bit of background information, and let's get into the meat of the matter. I think this slide is kind of informative only because if you look at those two, what you see on the left-hand side is the expenditures for an elder, and on the right-hand side you're going to see the rest of the households, okay? All households in the West. And I think the thing that's remarkable about this is there isn't a substantial difference. If you look at on the bottom, you're talking about housing. The little red is apparel. Transportation is green. Food is purple. When you get to health care, that's where you start to see a difference. With an older adult, they're spending more on health care, and that leaves less for the miscellaneous, which is the orange at the top, okay? So in Whatcom County, what are we talking about? Well, we've always, with the Elder Care Index, they divide folks up into three groups. The first group is an elder homeowner without a mortgage, and that's going to be the one on your far left here. And basically what that says is, for an elder who has a mortgage that's paid off, they need approximately $1,589 in Whatcom County, okay, to make it and have a reasonable quality of life. The second group is the renter, okay? If you're renting, and many older adults think that's the way to go because they just call the landlord then and they come and fix the problems. A renter, of course, has to spend more of their money on housing, obviously, and they need approximately $1,814 a month. And those individuals on the far right-hand side are in fact homeowners who are still paying on a mortgage. And in order to make that in Whatcom County, the average is right around $2,500 a month, okay? When we're looking at the slides that are coming, you're going to determine that they're divided up into these same three groups at all junctures. So the cost of a quality life in Whatcom County, and these are what came out of the Market Basket survey, range from $19,000, and again, those are for your elders without a mortgage, to $21,700 to $29,700, almost $30,000 if you're still paying on a mortgage. And if in fact you're looking at retirement and thinking, oh, okay, that doesn't sound so bad, there's more information to come. In Whatcom County, we have about 50% of the people in Whatcom County who are retired are elders without mortgages, and that's good news. So 50% of them only have to reach the bottom line there, the blue box. 22% of our elders are in fact elders who are renting. And 28% of our elders are those elders who are continuing to pay on a mortgage. And their costs are often beyond reach as they go. Now when you talk about costs, you also have to consider income. And these are the incomes that we've got here. And this is kind of difficult to listen, but let me just walk you through this. The yellow box on the left is in fact the average Whatcom County Social Security for women, okay? And that's $12,428, okay? The dark blue box is the average Social Security in Whatcom County for men, and that's about $16,500, right? A little bit more because in this generation, who were the wage earners? There's always been a disparity, and oftentimes some of you probably didn't work outside the home. And so that's what's happening there. When you look at the median income, and that's the one that's right smack dab in the middle with just half of the data above and half of the data below, $18,400 for women and $22,076 for men. Those are the median incomes in Whatcom County for people over the age of 65. Okay? Now, let's take those and let's overlay them. Okay? Remember what these are. This is a goofy, goofy slide, but I think you're with me. The first one, the blue box here, is in fact the renter costs. That's what, or not the renter, the cost of a person without a mortgage. Okay? So 19,068. The red box is 21,768. That's for a person who is renting. And the green box is what it costs for someone who's paying on a mortgage. And what is overlaid over the top of them was the previous slide of the income. Okay? So you see the women there on the bottom in the yellow, and that's their Social Security. And you see the men who are only receiving Social Security. And you see the median income for women, and you see the median income for men, and what do you see? Okay? There's some issues. There's some gaps there. If in fact you are a female in Whatcom County making the average, living on only Social Security, which is the average Social Security, you do not make enough money to even be a person who's living in their home without a mortgage. If in fact you are a man on Social Security only, you do not make enough money to live in a home that's paid off. If you are a woman at the median income, you don't make enough to live in a home that's paid off. And no one can live in a place that has a mortgage on what our median income is. And that's not particularly good news. It becomes even more difficult when you start talking about medical costs. And when you start talking about medical care, these are out-of-pocket medical costs for people in the yellow or the lighter colored boxes are people with a Medicare Advantage plan, which is like a managed care HMO type plan. And the other are the people that are taking the fee-for-service, Medicare Part B, Part D, and might have a gap insurance there. And if in fact they're in excellent health, we're looking between $3,500 and $4,500. If they're in good health, which is the middle bars, $4,000 to $5,000. And if they're in poor health, we start to kind of level out there, and we're talking approximately $6,000. And these are the annual out of costs. So you can see that it makes a tremendous difference. When you start talking about long-term care, let's say the health care didn't make it, we're having to make some very difficult decisions because we don't have enough to even pay our rent at this point in time. Our health is failing. We all of a sudden need long-term care. And these are the average costs of long-term care, okay, annual in-home costs for people who are living in their homes and bringing help in. And the yellow bar is people that have a low need, just light care, maybe need some help with occasionally with bathing or with, you know, housework, those kinds of things. Medium need is red. High is, the high green bar is actually people that have high need, lots and lots of care, but live in a community where there is adult day care. And in Whatcom County, we have adult day health, which is a little different, but it's a great program. So we would fit probably in that group. And then high without adult day care goes up another $5,000. So you can see for the public pays less, and the reason the public pays less is because we negotiate those rates on a group basis. And we say, this is what our legislature will tell us, this is what you're going to pay, and that's what we pay, and that's it. On a private pay, you're looking at an additional $50,000 a year for long-term services and supports in your home. And they add up. And so here is our bars back again, and we're looking at long-term care is the green, additional medical is the red, and index income is the blue. So we've got our three areas there, elder without a mortgage, elder renter, and elder with a mortgage. And look at the costs that we're looking at now. $72,000, $76,000, and $83,000. And that's for an elder who has long-term care needs. So how many of you, when you were adding those numbers up in your head, included long-term care and medical? Okay? Big important stuff to think about. So what does this mean? Well, what this means is that these figures show that most older adults will need help with cost-effective long-term care and medical care. It's not something that they're going to be able to do on their own. How many of you would have an extra $84,000 laying around that you could pay to a nursing home? And if you do, great. And how many years could you do that? Okay, maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. I like to call long-term care the great equalizer, because even the people that made lots and lots of money eventually will spend down to the point, and most of us will wind up using public dollars to stay in a facility or to stay at home. So we need to be looking at long-term care costs that are very, very manageable. In Whatcom County, our average Social Security income across the board is $14,212. That's the average, not the median. And look at the costs for the 3 different types. We've got the $19,000, the $21,000, and the $29,000, and the average is drawn right where that would be. And so what do we do with those folks? They can't afford anything. And interestingly, about 1 out of 5, or 1 out of 4 people in Washington State are receiving, in Whatcom County are receiving only Social Security. So we know that housing costs put a heavy burden on elders, and they account for about half of their expenses. Wait lists in Whatcom County for subsidized housing are years long. In fact, at this point in time, I think they're probably still closed. And so there is no opportunity to get on those programs. Maintenance is a problem, because that's one of the things that you say, gosh, I really should fix the porch, but I don't have enough money to fix the porch, and so I'll just be real careful. And the next thing you know, you've fallen through the porch, and you've broken a hip, and you wind up in that high medical cost and needing long-term care, and so it doesn't help to not do the maintenance. And one of the things that happens is the fall rate. If you were to look at the fall statistics, when they hit 65, they just go right off the charts. And so people are falling for a variety of reasons, which can also lead to long-term care. Elders in Whatcom County have substantial out-of-pocket costs even with Medicare. I think a lot of people, particularly those of you who aren't on Medicare, think that Medicare covers it all. But the reality is that there's a lot of out-of-pocket costs that go for a person who's on Medicare and relying on it. Elders in poor health spend about $7,000 a year with Medicare, okay? Retired couples, again, don't save any money. Remember that that's going to be double, so it's going to be a $14,000 hit. They don't save any money by the family plan. Elders who are currently making ends meet will face financial shortfalls if, in fact, their partner passes, okay? Often costs will reduce by about 31%. So if my husband were to pass away, my costs would go down by about 31% because I'd use less water, maybe less electricity, you know, those kinds of things. But my income is probably going to go down by half, or in some cases more than half. And so then I have a real problem, because you don't get to keep your partner's Social Security if they're no longer walking here. And a lot of people don't realize that. Poor health dramatically increases expenses. The need for long-term care, even cost-effective community-based care, which is really the way things are done here in Washington State, can double or triple the expenses that we need. And home care at a high level costs around I'm going to say $40,000 to $48,000 a year, which is on top of your expenses. Skilled nursing care in Whatcom County, if in fact you were to pay for it out of pocket, is about $84,000 a year, okay? So what happens is people start to rely on their kids a little more. And they rely on their grandkids, and they rely on their neighbors, and they rely on their church, and they rely on people that they have at the city club, and they rely on people that they know. And yeah, you guys keep paying your membership. I'm saying, Skip, you owe me for that one. Elders cannot meet their basic needs if they live at the federal poverty level. Do you see why that $10,000 is kind of a joke? I mean, why are we even thinking about that? They can't meet them if they're living at the poverty level or on the average Social Security income. 8% of Whatcom County elders live below the federal poverty line, okay? Yep, 8%. And 1 in 4 residence has only Social Security. There's no 401ks. A lot of these people may be people that you worked with, or maybe people that worked for you. If you didn't have a defined benefit pension, chances are it's these folks right here. What happens then is, I think almost every day in our office, an elder is walking in and saying, I need to find a place to work. I got to go back to work. And looking for jobs, part-time jobs, to help ends meet. Kathy, I'm going to trade mics with you. Do you have yours? Mine is cutting out. Sometimes elders have to access safety net services in order to make sure that they can make ends meet. I think we're okay. And safety net services are those provided by some of the people here at the table. Whatcom County Council on Aging, raise your hands. They do a tremendous job providing Meals on Wheels to people, congregate feeding programs, a lot of other things in that direction. And so I think that it's important to recognize that there is a safety net out there, but a vast majority of it is funded through public dollars, and those are scarce. These are some of the safety net services which are here. We have an Aging and Disability Resource Center here for people to ask questions and learn about these things. We have caregiver support for those people who are caring for people in the home, because those people provide about 80% of the caregiving in the state. And when you look at how much money that's saving us, it really does help to support them in their role. Whatcom County Council on Aging does congregate meals at the senior centers, which are available to people on a donation basis. There is, if you've ever heard there is no such thing as a free lunch, well, there is actually. If you're low enough income that you can't afford to donate, you're still going to get fed. If you go to a senior center and you're in those people, you're at the place where you can donate a little more, that would be very, very helpful to the program. Subsidized housing, energy assistance, there's programs to help people pay their bills. Workforce Development Council does job training, property tax relief. A Senior Smiles program provides dental care, oral health care, because guess what, guys? That's not covered by Medicare, nor are eyeglasses, nor are hearing aids. And that's kind of a comeuppance for those of us who've been in a good position where that's been provided for us, and suddenly we don't have it. And then I put the Lions Club on there. How many lions do we have in the room? We have any? I'll be doggone. The Lions Club does a remarkable job of rehabbing and reusing durable medical equipment. So if in fact somebody needs a wheelchair temporarily, give us a call. We can help you connect with the Lions Club, and they do a beautiful job with that. So what's the bottom line here? Well, planning retirement includes much more than contributing to your 401k. If you're doing that, that's great. But please spend some time to understand Social Security, how it works, that they don't take taxes out of it unless you ask them to. Look into housing. Figure out what you need. Pay your home off if you can, or at least have someplace, a kitty, where you can pay it off. And if you're in a home that you'll never pay off and you don't need the tax relief, great stuff, it'll help. But if you're in a home that you'll never pay off, you might want to consider downsizing. And here's another hint for you. If you're going to change to a retirement home, make sure that it's accessible. A very sad story, I met a woman one time who had relocated from Southern California to Anacortes. She built their dream house, and her husband had a stroke probably the first month they were in the house. And the house was one to take advantage of the view on the side of a hill. It was on about 5 different levels. The master bedroom was clear at the top. The kitchen was on the next level. He couldn't get out of the basement. There was no way to get him in the house. So they wound up selling, going back to Southern California where they had family. So make sure your facility, where you're going to be living, is actually in good repair and accessible. Evaluate your expenditures and your ability to sustain it. What are your transportation costs? Do you really need that car payment? Insurance. Think about whether you need it. Okay, do I continue to pay into a life insurance policy that's going to get cut in half when I actually cash it in? Look at your utility bills. Now's the time to do the changes that will help to save money down the road. Sell your gas guzzler. You know, if you don't drive very far, great stuff, you can keep it. But if you're driving around and you can get a different car, you're in better situation. And then take advantage of some of the energy efficiency things that are going on now so that you can have appliances which work well, cars that work well, all of those things. Look into medical care costs. Understand Medicare before you retire so that you know and you have charted out your direction before you get there. Medicare is not free. The future of Medicare is at this point kind of unknown. We don't know how Affordable Care Act is going to affect the changes. There likely will be some changes. Understand that in Whatcom County and in Washington State, long-term care does not mean a nursing home. Long-term care is done in the home these days. We take the services to the person in the home. And so if you have long-term care insurance, talk to your person about making sure that it covers home care, because the options there are probably a lot better for you. Eat well. I'm a dietitian by trade, and eating well, I see people who've made terrible choices all their life, and they're reaping the rewards of that in their golden years. Exercise, okay? And I don't care if it's just getting up out of your chair and walking over to change the channels manually instead of using the clicker, okay? But exercising now will help. Think about not only your cardiovascular health, but think about balance, okay? Think about Tai Chi. Think about flexibility. How many of you can put your socks on without sitting down? Well, one or two of you can still do it. That's good news. My mother has passed away, but she would insist that I remind you to always wear clean underwear, okay? And the reason for that is because one never knows, does one, where you're going to wind up. And so always wear clean underwear. I just want to throw that in there. And then the bottom line here is something that some of us really have to take to heart, and it's just be nice to your kids, all right? Because it's a good possibility that given what's happening to the economy, given what's going on in Whatcom County, we're going to be counting on them a little more than maybe they your parents counted on you. So for more information, there's a website listed there. You can contact Dr. Knight wherever you went over here. Kathy's information is there. You can contact me. My telephone number, my email, my website, we're all on that slide. And I thank you for your kind attention.
We're going to have Kathy and Shelley come up here for the few minutes that we have left, and give folks a chance to ask a couple of questions. And they will bring their microphones with them.
Yes, are there any? Chuck.
We have something going on in the country right now. We're in a budget crisis. We're very likely to have a sequester. I would like to hear what your comments are on how that's going to affect things right now. Either we have a sequester, or we're going to be cutting spending, which is also going to have an impact, or we're going to be raising taxes. Can you comment on that, please?
I'd be delighted to comment on it. I don't know if, Victoria, you had those.
Mike.
I'm sorry. I'd be delighted to comment on that. I don't know if the sequester handouts are there. We can put some at the back table. We actually put together a handout with some examples of people who will be affected by the sequester, who have used the safety net services and what they meant to them. And I encourage you to read those because they're your neighbors. The loss of 10%, okay, which is what they're saying at this point. We don't know how it's going to wind up. It could be devastating to programs like Meals on Wheels and congregate meals. I'll use that because we've got the folks here in the audience. And those individuals, what will happen is instead of offering meals Monday through Friday, the meals will go to Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or maybe they'll close down meal sites altogether. And those kinds of changes are not things that are helpful in the face of the data which we looked at today. So big issues. If you have an inclination to look at the documentation, I'm happy to answer questions about it as well on an individual basis. But these are very important services which serve people who have worked their entire lives to support people in this country. They've made this country what it is and are facing a need for the services, and now we're looking at them being cut. So the results will be devastating.
Okay, over here.
Hello, this is not so much a question as just a comment to give you a little reflection. I'm a joint U.S.-Canadian citizen, spend half my time here, half time in Vancouver, and among the things I do, I chair the Community Investment and Relations Committee of the United Way. And we spend about $30 million a year on 3 priorities, one of which is the elderly. And just for you to know, the fastest growing group of homeless in Vancouver is the elderly. And we now have a goal of no homeless by 2020. So we're going to work on that. But we've just started a program called Better at Home, which is primarily directed at the elderly. And what we did is research by talking to the elderly and saying, what is it that prevents you at staying at home? And there were a few factors we found, some of which you've not talked about, but which are very important, such as social isolation. It's just too lonely to be at home. Having some transportation, having light housekeeping, having non-medical health care, and as you know, we have a single-payer system, so health care is provided, but there are other health needs that are not provided as part of the system. Working with the province to try to achieve some of the goals that we've heard today, we've just received a grant of $15 million to start a Better at Home program in every district within the province of British Columbia. So this is probably a positive message saying, don't despair. There's hope out there. There are things that can be done.
Or move to Canada, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, move.
First of all, thank you for all the excellent data. So I kind of have to apologize. What I'm asking for is you showed us excellent Whatcom County data. It's important for me to know to compare it to the context around the rest of the country. So if you'd shown us national data, I'd be saying, oh, but yeah, but what about Whatcom data? Well, you showed us Whatcom data. How does it compare to the rest of it? Are we better off, worse off?
I'm going to let Kathy answer that one.
Well, I can't tell you. Nationally, I think that the first time they did the index, when we were participating in the study, our average state costs in Washington were higher than the national average by probably a couple thousand. Since that, the latest data I've seen, we're not so different from, and that's at the state level. Now, the comparison between Whatcom County and the state is, for instance, slightly, yeah, I was going to say, you're a little bit below the state average. Yeah, so it's a little bit cheaper to live here. To answer that first question, it's a little bit cheaper to live here than maybe in some other counties in the state or on a statewide basis. We can get you all that data, though. It's so easy. It's a national database. You can find out if you want to be in Connecticut, wherever.
There's also an excellent report on the web page that is on the last page of the handout, which is a PDF that you can download, which is the national data as well. Yeah.
That answered my question.
I'm psychic.
Hey, stand up. There we go.
You say that the sequester would be devastating. On the other hand, there's trade-offs that we have to make all the time. In your opinion, what would be more devastating? A 10% cut to the public programs, or the closing of tax loopholes on banks and petroleum companies and a billionaire's tax?
Wait a minute, that's a political statement, not
yeah.
a question.
I think I'll reserve that for a later date.
That's above my pay grade to answer. I just wanted to make a comment because, yes, we all know that if we're listening to the news by Friday, some big things are going to happen, and we're going to see cuts to a number of programs, safety net programs that Shelley was describing in her presentation. And so we all have to be concerned about that. The value, I think, of some of what this what I found so valuable about this initiative is it gives us great information to really plan better. You know, for folks who need to be planning ahead and to be looking forward to trying to meet your own needs as much as possible, I realize many, many people, because of the recession we've just gone through, have lost tremendous assets, find themselves in very, very difficult positions they never expected to be in. They thought they would be able to handle all of their costs and their needs. So there's only so much you can do. But I also think what we need to recognize that this data allows us to do is plan ahead for our own futures. And I wanted to also say, you have a senator in this area, Senator Bailey, is that correct? No, not, oh, sorry. Well, anyway, there's a couple bills in the legislature, in the state legislature, that you should be very interested in, because both in the House and the Senate, they're looking at an effort to really plan ahead. Let's recognize this dramatic shift in the demographics, this silver tsunami that we've heard about, and really do a better job in this state planning for those needs and looking at not only the needs but also the assets that come with the aging population. And so one of through a special committee that would be set up, they'd be looking at a lot of different things, including a study on financing of long-term care and looking at those kind of costs. And that's something we really haven't done a good job of addressing. So hopefully those bills will continue making their way through the legislature.
Here we go.
This is a question for Shelley, I guess. As far as the public housing situation here in Whatcom and the waiting list being closed, what do you see in the foreseeable future about turning that around, since there's a growing need? Thank you.
The housing issue has been an issue for many, many years in Whatcom County because we just don't have enough. But it's not just Whatcom County, it's a national issue. There just are not enough public housing slots for people who are so very, very low income. The beauty of the public housing system for many older adults is it guarantees that their rent will be basically no higher than 1/3 of what their income is. And so if you're living on $600 a month Social Security, okay, then you will pay $200 a month for rent. And so it's important, it's a huge benefit for individuals that are there. But the fact that there aren't enough slots, there aren't enough Section 8 vouchers, I don't see, Whatcom County or Bellingham passed the housing initiative where they're going to be doing some work in developing those, and I see a lot of hope. But the comment from the gentleman who is from Canada, the number of, we see the folks, the visible folks on the street that we see who are homeless are not elderly. And that's because the homeless elderly are not visible. They benefit from being invisible. They're less of a target, and so they just don't show up. And it is a challenge. There are homeless elderly people. I was talking with Mike at the food bank, and he said, 25 to 30% of the people in the food bank line are people over the age of 65. So it's not invisible. If you look, you will see it. And the housing issue is a huge benefit for those people who can actually access it.
Is this one? Nope. I was just curious if any of you were aware of organizations, NGOs, any efforts out there that are looking at the economic models for collectivizing and leveraging the power of the disparate, elderly communities to try and, better take advantage, because while we can see it's not coming up to the needs right now, there's also a huge asset there, and a lot of people have worked all their lives and are creative. And so I was just wondering if there's models to try and bypass the middlemen and form organizations, institutions, ways of approaching elderly living that would allow more choice and more leverage of the assets that are out there.
I'll just speak to, I know where you're going with that. I think that one of the things that I have learned in that area is a lot of the really creative solutions for aging are actually coming out of Europe and Japan. We're seeing some very interesting people, you know, kind of deciding to develop co-housing on a very informal basis, where the group of people who know one another move into the same hotel or the same apartment building and share a concierge to help them do some of the things that they aren't able to do on their own. Think about what would happen if you couldn't have driven here. Or think about what's happening if you can't get to the pharmacy and your pharmacy doesn't deliver. And so there are some things that are happening to take advantage of that. And the sad truth about that, though, is that the people who are able to afford even the concierge type system or the co-housing system are generally people who can afford to decide where they're going to live and not just accept wherever they can live. And so it tends to be individuals who are probably above those can't make it lines.
And I think there are initiatives around the country addressing some of those perspectives. Also, it's worth noting that our new governor has made a commitment for an aging summit. And part of that aging summit is to help us better plan in this state. And it's looking at the assets, looking at the needs, looking at using the resources within the aging community. And I think it holds some promise for us to be moving in a direction where planning, where we came up with a term we called aging readiness several years ago. And so it's kind of all that effort to say, let's do a better job of really making sure our state is moving in the right direction.
Thank you both. We've run out of time. I don't know that we've run out of questions, but we have run out of time. So join me in thanking Shelley and Kathy for their presentation. And City Club has a tradition, even though we don't pay our speakers, we do have a book, Whatcom Places, for each of you. So, thank you.